If you've ever struggled to take a good photo, here's something that you can think about. There are two different types of photography. There is creative photo shoot style photography, and then there's photojournalistic documentation, candid style of photography. But before we talk about that, I want to show you something. Okay, so right now I'm out in the Canadian wilderness in the forest, and it's -14, which is, you can kind of see why I'm wearing all these layers and have these ridiculous boots on. But the point is, it's kind of just, you know, it's not the top of a mountain, it's not an ice cave, it's just an okay location. Some people, in fact, would even call it boring. But you can see behind me for the last 2 days, we've been living inside of that snow fort, snow shelter, if you want to call it that. And, you know, we've been documenting the process because for us, it's more of a photojournalistic documentation type experience. But the photos don't have to be boring. They can be equally as exciting if you know a few tricks. So I'm going to give you 5 tips for taking your boring photos and making them more interesting. One thing you can do is look for interesting angles. So if you have your camera, instead of just taking the photo at standing height, you could get low and point up, or get high and point down. And depending on what lens you have, you could zoom in more to get more detail, or zoom out more to get a wide panoramic view. Sometimes capturing more allows you to tell a little bit more of a story. Plus, every day we see things at eye level, at standing height. When you go out of your way to capture things at a slightly different angle, it opens up a whole new perspective. So this is an example of a low angle, but a low angle might not work for you depending on the look that you're going for. So here's another example. This is isolating your subject. In this case, I'm in focus, but the background is out of focus. And so instead of being distracted by everything that's going on here, you're focused in on me. This is a great technique to use if you have a more telephoto lens, like 50 millimeters or 70 millimeters or more than 100 millimeters. But if you don't, in order to isolate your subject, move closer. Like right now, I'm about this far away from my camera lens, which allows the camera to use depth of field to focus on me. And you can use this technique in portrait photography, in product photography, or really on any type of photography where you want your subject to pop out from the background. Plus, who wants to look at an old, boring forest anyway? Today I opted to shoot on the 24-105 just because it's a smaller lens and easier to bring with you when you're camping and don't have a lot of space. But check this out. I love winter just because it hides everything and kind of leaves you guessing at what's under the blanket of snow. Now, if you're a little bit more experienced with photography, Now, if you're a little bit more experienced with photography and you have a camera that allows you to do this, doing a time lapse is a great way to spice up your photos. It's not quite a photo, it's kind of like a photo video, but what you're doing is incorporating the factor of time. Time allows you to show things happening, whether that's rolling clouds or cars going by or people moving. Now all of a sudden, what used to be a static photo is a whole bunch of photos put together, and I guess it's technically a video, but you get what I'm saying. Doing time-lapse photography is a great way to spice up your otherwise boring photos. So another option is to use your camera settings to show the passage of time. In the case of your shutter speed, shutter is used to allow the camera to take a longer exposure to allow more light in, or a shorter exposure to allow less light in. But what you can also show inside of a single frame is time. So in the case of this photo where we had the saw, I was shooting at maybe like 1/50, 1/40, and because everything in the background was stationary and the saw was moving, the saw is blurry. Okay, so maybe it's not the greatest photo, but you can use this to do panning photography of cars. Actually, check out this video here if you want to see more about that. Or you can use it on a bicycle going by, or someone doing sports where they're moving really fast and you want to blur out the background, or even doing long exposure photography so that people look blurry, or all the motion inside the scene looks blurry, but then everything that's stationary is static. Now, in order to achieve this, you might need an ND filter or a tripod to keep your camera steady. So make sure you're using the right tools for the right job. Now, this next tip I think is the most important. It's one that was hammered into my brain when I was in architecture school, and one that is so important to photography, especially if you want to include an element of storytelling inside your photos. And maybe you've guessed it, but it's to include the human scale. So through a lot of the photos that I've been showing you and the video samples, there's always a little bit of a hint of a human, of a person. And the reason for that is it helps bring everything into context. So if you just see a forest full of trees, it's not obvious how big the trees are. It's not obvious how big the snow fort that we're living inside of is. But when you put a human in front of that snow fort, snow shelter, or you put a human next to that tree, it really brings everything together. Which again is why it helps if you're going to take photos to bring someone with you, because then you have someone to take photos of and someone who can take photos of you. I'm ready to go home and warm up. So I hope you enjoyed those camera outdoor tips. Oh, but is there a photo tip I missed? If you think so, go ahead, leave it down in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, give it a like or consider subscribing. And if you do, I'll see you in the next one. Can't forget this.